When Brad Garlinghouse speaks, the crypto world listens. But this time, what he said and what he hinted might change everything for XRP holders. Because behind the scenes, the president and CEO of Ripple just confirmed what many of us have suspected for months. The next phase of XRP's rise isn't speculation, it's execution. And while most investors are still arguing about charts and headlines, the people running Ripple are quietly revealing the roadmap for something far bigger than anyone imagined. Welcome back to Crypto Equation, where we cut through noise and decode what's really moving the markets. Let's start with what was actually said. In a recent interview, Brad Garlinghouse talked about how Ripple is entering the next growth chapter. He didn't use hype, he used data. He spoke about real-world adoption, institutional use cases, and partnerships that have been building quietly for years. And then he said something that sent waves through the XRP community. The world is moving faster toward blockchain adoption than most people realize, and Ripple is positioned right at the center of that evolution. That's not just confidence, that's confirmation. Because when the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company starts hinting that the groundwork is finished and the scaling phase has begun, it means the rise is only beginning. For years, Ripple has been the misunderstood giant of crypto, respected by institutions, dismissed by speculators. While everyone chased hype projects, Ripple built the infrastructure, licenses in key financial regions, corridors across 70+ countries, enterprise-level liquidity through on-demand liquidity, ODL, a legally clarified digital asset, XRP. Those are not rumors, those are facts. And Garlinghouse just connected those dots in public. He described how Ripple's focus has shifted from building technology to scaling adoption. That single line changes the entire narrative. Think about what that means. For a decade, Ripple was laying bricks, compliance, regulation, partnerships. Now it's turning on the engines. ODL volume has already grown more than tenfold since 2020. Tokenization pilots with financial institutions are expanding. Ripple's acquisition of firms like Metaco shows it's preparing to custody and tokenize institutional-grade assets, bonds, commodities, maybe even CBDCs. And the CEO didn't deny it. In fact, he confirmed that Ripple is aligning with major central banks and Fortune 500 clients. That's the kind of leak that isn't a rumor. It's an admission of progress. Most XRP holders think growth means price action. But Ripple's leadership keeps reminding us, price follows utility. Garlinghouse emphasized that every partnership adds transactional depth to XRP's liquidity network. He knows the world's financial plumbing is being rebuilt, and XRP is one of the few assets already compliant enough to plug into it. That's why when he smiles and says, "We're just getting started," it's not bravado. It's a message to those paying attention that the infrastructure phase is almost complete. He also revealed something subtle, but huge. Ripple is working on real-time liquidity solutions that can support not just cross-border payments, but tokenized asset settlement. That means the same system that moves remittances could soon move tokenized treasuries, real estate, and more. That's the endgame. A multi-trillion-dollar network running quietly on the rails XRP helped build. And that's exactly why the rise isn't about hype. It's about readiness. To put this in perspective, remember how the internet evolved. In the 1990s, everyone talked about websites. The real money was made by those who built the infrastructure, the routers, servers, and cloud networks. In finance, Ripple is building that infrastructure. Garlinghouse's comments confirm that the connections, compliance, and partnerships are already in place. He knows that once banks start moving tokenized value through RippleNet, demand for XRP stops being speculative and becomes structural. That's when the numbers start doing the talking. And here's where it gets exciting. Ripple has begun rolling out integrations with enterprise liquidity providers who can process billions in volume. These aren't retail exchanges. They're institutional hubs that link banks, payment companies, and even government entities. Garlinghouse called it scaling liquidity like AWS scaled the cloud. That's not a coincidence. It's the same playbook Amazon used. Build the rails, own the infrastructure, and let the world run on it. If XRP becomes the liquidity layer of tokenized finance, this comparison isn't just inspiring, it's accurate. But there's more. Garlinghouse also teased Ripple's involvement in CBDC interoperability pilots. Central banks in Europe, Asia, and the Middle East are experimenting with blockchain for cross-border value exchange. Ripple's technology and XRP are central to several of those pilots. He didn't have to say XRP will power this. He just smiled and said, interoperability is where Ripple shines. That's corporate code for we're already in the room. So when you hear the CEO saying the rise is only beginning, you should realize he's talking about an adoption curve most investors can't even see yet. When Brad Garlinghouse talks about interoperability, he's talking about the digital foundation of tomorrow's money system, a world where currencies, banks, and even governments exchange value seamlessly through blockchain. And here's the key: someone has to supply that liquidity. That's where XRP fits perfectly. Most people still think of XRP as a payment coin, but Ripple's leadership is positioning it as something much bigger, a universal settlement asset for the entire tokenized economy. That means not just payments, but tokenized bonds, CBDCs, and assets flowing through the same rails. That's why Garlinghouse's recent comments feel like a leak, not an interview. Because for the first time, he's publicly describing a phase of expansion that looks less like a startup and more like a financial infrastructure rollout. Let's connect the dots. Ripple now has regulatory clarity in the US after its 2023 partial court victory, active corridors in over 70 countries, partnerships with banks and fintechs that handle billions in remittances, a stake in tokenization infrastructure through its acquisition of Metaco, and they're not slowing down. Garlinghouse hinted that more acquisitions are coming, not just in crypto, but in traditional finance and liquidity services. That's Ripple preparing for scale. That's how you know the rise isn't about next week's chart, it's about next decade's architecture. He also mentioned something every investor should pay attention to: timing. He said, "The technology has been ready for years. The world is finally catching up." That's the inflection point every early investor dreams of. Because when the infrastructure is ready and regulation aligns, acceleration happens almost overnight. It's the same tipping point the internet hit around 2005, when the systems people had ignored suddenly became unavoidable. That's what's coming for XRP. Think about how Ripple's growth curve looks right now. For a decade, they've been in the build phase. Licenses, compliance, corridors, credibility. Now they're in the scale phase. Enterprise integration, global liquidity, tokenized settlement. That's when visibility explodes, and Garlinghouse knows it. When he says we're entering a period of real utility, that's corporate shorthand for we're already seeing volume and it's rising fast. Here's what most investors miss. Growth like this doesn't appear on CoinMarketCap first. It shows up in transaction data and liquidity metrics long before the price chart reacts. That's why the CEO's comments sound calm, because he knows the fundamentals are already shifting. He's watching RippleNet handle billions in remittances, while retail investors stare at candles wondering why the line isn't moving yet. But markets always lag utility. Price is the echo of adoption, not the signal. And this is where the story gets truly powerful. Ripple's vision isn't just to move money, it's to make value itself interoperable. In that system, XRP is the connective tissue. Every corridor, every tokenized asset, every CBDC transaction increases the demand for bridge liquidity. So when Garlinghouse says we're just beginning, he's describing exponential math, because network effects compound slowly, then suddenly. One corridor doubles to 10, 10 become 100, and before anyone realizes it, XRP is woven into the background of global finance. That's when everything changes. At that point, XRP isn't a host crypto asset anymore. It's financial infrastructure, invisible, necessary, irreplaceable. The kind of technology people use every day without even realizing it. That's what Amazon became for e-commerce. That's what the internet became for communication. And that's what Ripple is building XRP to become for money movement. It's not about hype, it's about inevitability. The clues have been there all along. Ripple registering in new jurisdictions, developers launching tokenized projects on the XRP ledger, financial institutions testing cross-border settlement with XRP liquidity, and now the CEO himself confirming that the global rollout has begun. If you connect those dots, you see what's coming next. Ripple isn't announcing it loudly because they don't have to. They're executing. And execution always looks boring until it changes everything. So what does this mean for you? It means you're watching a company transition from building to dominating. You're witnessing the moment when preparation meets inevitability. And if you understand that, you realize why Garlinghouse's tone was so confident. He's not speculating, he's reporting. The leak isn't a secret price target. It's the acknowledgement that the rails are ready and the world is starting to use them. That's how every revolution begins. Quietly, then all at once. A few years from now, people will replay these interviews and realize what he was really saying. They'll see XRP moving trillions in liquidity across global networks. They'll see Ripple embedded in tokenization and CBDC frameworks. And they'll wonder how they missed it when it was right in front of them. That's the irony of being early. It feels uncomfortable while it's happening, and obvious afterward. So when you hear the CEO say, "The rise is only beginning," take him at his word, but understand what he means. He's not talking about a price spike. He's talking about an era, the moment when XRP evolves from potential to infrastructure. That's the rise that matters. Because when financial systems finally need XRP to operate, the conversation will shift from if to how much. And by then, today's uncertainty will look like opportunity. Dash. If this helped you see what's really unfolding, subscribe to Crypto Equation, where we break down crypto, finance, and investing with facts, logic, and foresight. Because sometimes the biggest leaks aren't secrets, they're signals. And this one couldn't be louder. This is Crypto Equation, and I'll see you in the next one.